The wind dragged the dust across the ridge, slow and stubborn, like it carried stories nobody wanted to hear anymore. Out there on the plains, silence had a way of filling the spaces where words once lived, and in that silence sat Silas Danner. He was perched on the edge of his narrow bed, boots already laced, hat balanced in his lap. He hadn't moved for what felt like hours. His eyes were locked on the floorboards beneath his feet, the same boards he'd paced across 1,000 times, like maybe if he stared long enough, they'd whisper back something he needed to hear. But they never did. Sleep. It didn't come to him the way it used to. It wasn't like a thief slipping in and out unnoticed. No, sleep had become more like an old friend, who once stopped by often, shared long evenings, and then, one day, stopped visiting altogether, left without explanation. So he didn't toss, didn't turn. He just lay there through the long nights, waiting for mornings that never truly felt like beginnings. The knock came late, closer to noon than morning, when the sun was hanging heavy overhead, and the air shimmered with heat. It wasn't timid, not the kind of knock that asked permission. 3 sharp raps, spaced out like a warning. Silas blinked, slow. His hand tightened around the brim of his hat, then he set it on his head. For a strange second, he found himself listening for the familiar scratch of paws against the doorframe, though his old dog had been gone 6 winters now. Funny how habits linger. When he finally opened the door, he didn't find the past waiting. He found the present, dust-covered and worn down. 3 women stood there. The road had left its marks on them. Dust clung to their skirts like lace, and sun had pulled the color from their faces. But it wasn't just travel that carved the weariness in their eyes. This was the kind of tired that comes from carrying burdens deeper than distance. In the middle stood Martha Lee. Her braid was pinned back with a kind of stubborn neatness, though the prairie wind had already started to pull it loose. She looked at him square, steady, like she didn't have time for apologies. On her left was Ivy, her younger sister, arms crossed, chin lifted. Her stance was half challenge, half shield, as if daring him to turn them away. Beside her, quiet Ruth clutched a bundle wrapped in faded burlap close against her chest, holding it like something fragile, though her hands shook from the weight of more than just fabric. "Flood came down through Ash Hollow Creek," Martha said, her voice steady, words clipped to the truth. "Tore the roof clean off the barn. Town's full up. Yours is the only porch still empty." Silas glanced past them to the horizon. No wagons, no riders, no movement. Just the sagging windmill creaking in his own bones, reminding him of time. He cleared his throat, voice dry as the dust. "The loft's dry. Stove still works. Long as you don't mind dust." Ivy rolled her eyes, sharp. "We're not porcelain." Martha gave the smallest nod. "We'll manage." Silas stepped aside. The women didn't wait for another word. They passed through his doorway like a breeze that didn't bother to ask permission. He didn't guide them, didn't offer blankets, didn't fetch bread. He just walked back to the edge of his bed, sat down and resumed his post, still as a scarecrow forgotten in a field. That night, the house felt different. Lantern glow flickered behind the kitchen door. The faint sound of laughter, foreign, almost startling, drifted from the barn. The sound didn't belong to him, but it climbed into the rafters and settled there, making the air warmer than it had been in years. Silas didn't sleep. He just listened, and for the first time in a long time, his restlessness didn't feel like a private burden. By dawn, the smell of frying cornmeal worked its way through the floorboards. When Silas stepped into the main room, he paused. Ruth was already sweeping the porch, quiet and careful. Ivy sat on the steps, tin mug steaming in her hands, humming something without a tune, and Martha stood over the stove, sleeves rolled, braid falling down her back like she had always belonged there. "You didn't have to cook," Silas muttered, reaching for a dented tin cup. Martha looked over, face unreadable. "Didn't do it for you." The coffee burned his tongue, but he didn't mind. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was comfortable in a way he hadn't expected. The women settled into the house without ceremony. Ruth sorted the pantry, humming quietly, while she arranged jars, as if order itself was a kindness. Ivy found a tear in the screen door, and patched it, cursing the stubborn nails under her breath. Martha pulled down the broken porch swing, set it across her lap, and began sanding the wood with slow, steady strokes. Silas watched, caught between feeling invaded and feeling spared. That afternoon, He saddled his horse and rode into Cedar Bluff. The general store smelled of ground coffee, pipe tobacco, and judgment. "Didn't think I'd see you in town, Danner," said Walt Harris, leaning against a sack of oats. "Heard you got company now. 3 women, huh?" Silas gave no reply. Widow Lee sure didn't waste time. Walt continued with a smirk. "Might be grief, might be something else. You'd know better." Behind the counter, Ella Price gave a slow, tired blink. "Don't listen to him," she said, voice sharp. "Some men think their mouths are worth more than their work." Silas dropped coins for his grain and left without a word. That night, instead of 1 chair, he set out 3 on the porch. He didn't explain. No one asked. Days began folding into rhythm. And Martha moved through the house like she was stitching it back together. Quiet, steady. She never asked what belonged to her and what didn't. She just picked up the pieces and made them whole. Silas kept to the edges. He fixed fence posts, hauled water, scribbled lines of poetry he'd once promised his wife, though the words refused to come. One evening, Martha left a small tin of salve beside his boots. "For the cracks," she said simply. He didn't thank her. Yet the next morning, the ache in his hands had eased. Not gone, but softer. The storm came sudden, rolling in heavy from the west. Rain hammered the land, sharp and furious. Ivy came running first, soaked and laughing. Mud streaked across her dress. Ruth followed close behind, cheeks flushed and hair plastered to her face. Martha lingered under the eaves, eyes tilted to the sky like she was trying to remember something long forgotten. Silas stood beside her, shoulder brushing hers. He didn't speak. "You want us gone?" she asked, voice low, steady, against the roar of the rain. He shook his head. "Then say it." "I don't," he answered, voice rough, unsure. "I just don't know how to need." Martha didn't smile, but she didn't step away either. Thunder cracked above them. An hour later, another knock. Silas opened the door to find Sheriff Dalton standing on the porch, rain dripping off his coat, hat in his hand. "Town's talking," the sheriff said flatly. "Some folks figure you're running a scandal. You know how that'll sit with counsel." Martha stepped into view behind Silas, arms crossed. "You here to arrest us?" Ivy shot back from the corner. "You came to ask what you want people to believe," Dalton replied, gaze fixed on Silas. Silas met his eyes, steady. "Let 'em believe whatever fills their empty hours." The sheriff gave one tight nod. "You came then or mean it." He turned, left without shaking hands. "If you tonight." Silas sat with the women by the hearth. No one laughed, no one sang. But the silence felt different, like a quilt pulled over tired shoulders. It didn't press down, it held. And in that warmth, with the storm finally easing and firelight glowing against his boots, Silas understood something he hadn't for years. They weren't guests anymore. They were what the house had needed. And maybe, just maybe, what he had needed too. And that is where Silas's story rests for now. A man who believed he had nothing left, until 3 strangers reminded him that even the loneliest house can feel like home again. But tell me, what would you have done if you were in his boots? Would you have opened the door, or turned them away? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, even just a little, don't forget to press the like button. It helps us bring more stories like this to life. Make sure you subscribe too, so the next time we sit down to share another tale, you'll be right here with us. Thank you for listening.